I mean, I think it's scary. I think you can see the chaos coming. The assumption of liberalism is let people argue and be freely speak and freely argue, and they'll come to the right decisions. But I would say since 2020, we're looking at an America that is just it's tottering on having the woke neo-Marxist ideology become kind of like the public ideology of the state. And if you look, sort of on the edges of the political right, like beyond conservatism, there's fast-growing thinkers. I mean, that a lot of the kids are reading who are arguing for dictatorship. They're just saying, look, the whole idea of the American Constitution has failed, and they're looking to dictatorship. So I think it's becoming really, really clear that if we don't start talking about conservation and transmission and restoration like a lot and focusing on it, I think America is in danger, and I think it's in danger of taking like all the democratic countries with it.
I'm Dave Rubin, and joining me today is one of the founders of the National Conservatism Conference, president of the Herzl Institute in Jerusalem, and author of the brand new book, Conservatism, A Rediscovery, Yoram Hazony. Welcome back to the Rubin Report.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me back.
It's good to see you, my friend. I sense by that background you are not in the Holy Land, but perhaps a slightly less holy land at the moment.
I'm here in D.C. I actually wanted to be with you in Florida, but you guys didn't have like room in the studio for me or something, so I'm in D.C.
We've been very busy. I just got back from tour. You're on the short list of people I would have been willing to have here at the house. But let's dive right into the book, because first off, I've got it in my hand. This is a dense, powerful book full of a whole bunch of the ideas that you've been talking about for really decades at this point. But I want to read just the first paragraph off the back flap here, because I think you say something very interesting that I think is the thing that sort of connects both of us. You say, conservatism as we know it has failed. While liberalism was eroding the foundations of our culture, the family, the nation, and religion, conservatives adopted the very principles that ensured their defeat. Routinely confused with classical liberalism, conservatism found itself defenseless before a ferocious and relentless foe. All right, now, you know I'm Mr. Classical Liberal. I think I helped bring that phrase back into the American lexicon, but you also know that I have found faults within the liberal lens. We've discussed them before, and we've discussed them at NatCon, actually, just a couple months back here in Florida. So what brings you, well, first let me let you define conservatism and how it's different than classical liberalism, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, well, conservatism's an Anglo-American political tradition. It goes back many centuries, long before Burke, and it's a tradition that puts the idea of transmission and stability of the nation at the center. So a conservative is always going to be asking questions like, have we upheld the main principles, traditions that are holding our people together? That can't go on forever. There's always deterioration. There's always things that change. And then a conservative is going to be looking back when something starts to fall apart, and saying, what can we restore? What can we go back to that used to work, that we really need and are sorry that we've lost?
So I think a lot of people are hearing that, and that's pretty clean and clear that, there were some hard-fought things of the past that we should remember and perhaps bring back into our daily lives. Does classical liberalism not grab a hold of all of that? What's the problem there?
Well, classical liberalism is something that is based on, like if you take a look at the big thinkers of the Enlightenment, the rationalist thinkers of the Enlightenment who who originally designed this, liberalism is it's a set of principles that begin with every human being is by nature free and perfectly equal, and the purpose of government is to give the individual to protect the rights and equalities that belong to the individual by nature. So the entire set of ideas that that are at the basis of liberalism, they're basically, lots of people have said this. They're basically they are a philosophy of freedom. They're a way of thinking about how do we work it so that people are maximally free and unconstrained. And the problem is, and this is something very deep and very serious that I really think we need to be talking about much more, is that human beings do not only need freedom by nature. And if you think human beings only need freedom, then I think you've got a mistaken and misleading philosophy. Human beings need to be constrained. They need to have guardrails and guidelines. They need to be encouraged to do the things that are needed in order to keep their society, their people, their families, to keep it going. And it used to be that I would say after World War II, there was a very, very strong impulse in America and across Europe to say, look, liberalism is it's all we need. People, private people will make the decisions about, where the guardrails should be, what the constraints should be. And maybe that made sense to a lot of people then. I think at this point, we've reached the point where, we're looking across America and across Europe, and I think it's scary. I think you can see the chaos coming. The assumption of liberalism is let people argue and be freely speak and freely argue, and they'll come to the right decisions. But I would say since 2020, we're looking at an America that is just it's tottering on having the woke neo-Marxist ideology become kind of like the public ideology of the state. And if you look, sort of on the edges of the political right, like beyond conservatism, there's fast-growing thinkers. That a lot of the kids are reading who are arguing for dictatorship. They're just saying, look, the whole idea of the American Constitution has failed, and they're looking to dictatorship. So I think it's becoming really, really clear that if we don't start talking about conservation and transmission and restoration like a lot and focusing on it, I think America is in danger, and I think it's in danger of taking like all the democratic countries with it.
All right, so you're hitting on a lot of the stuff that obviously I focus on, and I'm proud to say that at the end of my first book, Don't Burn This Book, I made an argument related to God and belief, connecting some of the classic liberal beliefs to that, because I saw what you're now talking about. I sort of saw it on the horizon that we could get to this point. So first, do you think, is that a flaw in liberalism, or is that a flaw in human nature, or is there even a distinction there in that from, say, World War II till about, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years ago, the liberal order sort of worked, right? Or I don't want to put words in your mouth. In my estimation, it sort of worked, and then suddenly this woke parasite got inside. But would you say that it roughly worked for a certain amount of decades?
Well, I think it's been running down. Look, I think 2020 was a shocking year in terms of just institutions all the way, from the New York Times to Princeton University just being taken over. I think it was a shocking year, and I don't want to say that it was obvious that was going to happen, but I think, as I write in this new book, I think the deterioration has been really clear, almost a straight line since the 1960s, even the 1940s. By 1960s is when is when there's this final decision that the United States is going to ban God, religious tradition, prayer, Bible, just ban it outright, more or less, from schools across the country. And the theory behind it was people said, look, our country, we live in a Christian country. Overwhelming majority of people are Christian. We can be tolerant and decent to other people, but basically, it's a Christian country, so we don't have to have this stuff in the schools. And I think pretty much since then, the assumption that you could just take God and Scripture out of the schools and it would continue to live like on Sundays and in people's homes, I think that turned out not to be true.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.